Hey there, I'm Lance and I'm a gamer.
And I'm Sam, and I'm a non-gamer.
And we are Love to Hate, where we help gamers find great games to play with non-gamers.
And today we're taking a look at Fiction by All Play.
Fiction is a word game where you will be playing one against all. And with that, what that means is that one player will be the librarian. And the librarian's job is to come up with a five-letter word, very much similar to Wordle, if you're familiar with that game, except in this case, as the librarian, you will be lying about one of the letters in the five-letter word, while the other players try to figure out what the word is in a certain number of guesses or before a timer runs out. Let me show you how the game works down below, and then we'll come back and share thoughts on it as a gamer and non-gamer. All right, I have Fiction on the table from All Play. Now, this is a word game that has some deduction and one against many, as you will be dealing with lying in this game. The person who is the one will be lying a little bit as they are the librarian, pun intended there. And the many in this game are trying to figure out what is the five-letter word. Very much the case being Wordle, if you are familiar with the internet game Wordle. That is kind of what's going on here. Now, what you have here with the components, you've got a central board or actually, this is not a central board. This is what the librarian will be using. You do have some guessing boards that the other players will be using. You've got tokens to indicate whether a letter is not correct or is in the word but not in the right spot, or if the letter is in the right spot and is correct. Then you also have a board to help keep track of what letters have already been used, and a couple of dual or dry erase markers, as well as some more tokens and some cards. Now, on these cards, let's focus on those for just a minute, because as part of setup, the person who's going to play as the librarian will select one of these cards, and as you can see, they are cards that are from great literary works that you will be familiar with. And really, as far as this goes, this does not really matter which card you select or which book you select it from. And I'm just going to pick a random one without you seeing which one I'm selecting from, so that it does not give anything away, and show you what's on the back side of these cards here. So on the back side of the cards is going to be some text from that story, and you'll see some yellow highlighted words and red highlighted words. And for a basic game, you'll select one of the yellow highlighted words. And if you've understood the game and everybody's familiar with the concept, then and you want a harder challenge for those who are trying to guess what the word is, then you could go with a red letter word. And the difference here is that the red letter words are going to have a repeat, a dual letter that's in the word twice. And so let's go with spark. Let's say that the word is spark, and that would be the secret word that the players are trying to figure out. Now, whoever is the librarian is going to have this board, and they're actually going to use the front cover of the box to tuck the main board into, because that's going to keep it hidden, and that way nobody can be able to see what the word is. And they'll write spark here, or whatever their word is, up in these boxes here, just to help them remember what that special word is. They'll obviously keep this hidden from the other players, and the other players will have these 10 guessing boards. Now, if you want to ramp up the difficulty, you could remove the amount of guesses that each round gets. There are 2 rounds in the game, and that's also denoted here on this board. You've got the blue-green round, and you've got this beige round. And that's important because this is a real-time game. You set a timer at the beginning of the game. The game recommends 10 minutes be the time length, but you could shorten that up if you want to make it harder for those who are trying to guess the word. And so you will have 10 minutes to come up with 5 guesses, and then you'll stop the timer, or whichever happens first. You'll have 5 guesses or 10 minutes. Whichever happens first, then you immediately go into the second round and set a 10-minute timer again, and you have 10 minutes and 5 more guesses to try and figure out what the word is. Now, as I mentioned, this is like Wordle, and if you're not familiar with what Wordle is about, then you are trying to figure out a 5-letter word using, the alphabet here, and you will be guessing a word. So, for instance, maybe I just put, let's go with group as my word. And that's horrible handwriting, but let's say that that is my guess. And then the librarian will take a look at my guess and put little tokens here that indicate whether or not I have any letters that are correct and in the right spot, any letters that are in the word but not in the right spot, or letters that are entirely not in the word. And if, for instance, the word was spark that I'm trying to figure out, then obviously they would probably put not in the right spot for this R and this P, but then they would be putting these X's for the other ones. And that's how Wordle would work. And you would use that information to deduce down what is the word that you're trying to figure out. Well, this is a little bit different in that the librarian is able to lie about one of the letters in your word that you're guessing. And so, for instance, if the librarian really did not want me to figure out that there is a P in the word, they might lie about that and just simply put an X under that rather than this token right here. Now, I don't know what that lie is, but I do know that there is a lie somewhere in the word. The librarian is going to lie every round. And how the librarian is taking notes, so let's go ahead and put Spark up here. And then the librarian will keep track of the guesses, writing the guesses on their board like so. And you would indicate here in these top boxes what is the correct clue that should be given. So, for instance, the correct clue would look something like this, indicating the letters that are not in the word and letters that are in the word, just not in the right spot. So that would be the very 100% truthful response that the librarian would give to the other team, but they get to lie about one thing. And so maybe they indicate what they're going to tell the other team by doing something like this, and you would circle the one that is a lie, because it should be the little wavy line, but we're going to lie about that and tell them, nope, P is not in the word. And so that's what would be the indicator factors with the tokens placed underneath this given back to the guessing team. And they would use that information to try to come up with a second guess. And they're trying to do this as quickly as possible because, again, this is timed. Now, using all that information, the guessing team also has 3 chances to try to pinpoint whether or not the librarian lied about something specific. You get to use these fact or fiction tokens, and you place them on one of the letters in one of the guesses that you've made. And so, for instance, if I felt like maybe the librarian was lying about that P, stating there's no P in the word, I could use this token right here and place it next to that P and say, I want to know whether you were lying or not about the P. And the librarian would either have to say, yep, I was lying, that is fiction, it's not an actual miss, it is in the word, or I would say, no, you know what, that was correct, I told the truth on that, and you would be able to gain a little bit more information using that piece there. And that's pretty much the gist of the game. Again, you can increase the difficulty by removing the number of guesses or the time limit in each of the 2 halves. But otherwise, that's the gist of it. And you ultimately need to try to figure out the word. And if at any point one of the guessing words is the actual word, so if I wrote spark on my guess word here, then the librarian would have to say, you got it, you win the game. Otherwise, the librarian wins if the other team is not able to figure out the word. And that is how you play fiction. Let's go back up top and share our thoughts on this one. And we're back, and now we're going to share our thoughts on fiction from a gamer and non-gamer's perspective. So Sam, I think it's important for our viewers to know what we think about word games as we get into this video, because this is a word game, although it is a different kind of word game. I don't know that I could think of another word game in which it's one against all, where one person is trying to mislead the other players. So this does kind of make it feel like a different kind of word game, but just word games in general, what are your thoughts on them?
I like them. I'm a horrendous speller, so that it's not my favorite type, but I enjoy the thought process that goes into them.
Okay. And I think it's important to mention that because there are word games where spelling is such an important
Yeah.
factor, or just having a big vocabulary is an important thing because in those kind of word games, generally, whoever is the best speller or has the biggest vocabulary usually wins those
Yeah.
kind of games. I mean, obviously, the biggest one being Scrabble.
Yeah.
That's not the case with this
Yeah.
game. You don't have to know how to spell anything because you're selecting your word based off of some cards.
Pre-approved list.
Pre-approved list, yes, exactly. And so you don't have to worry about that. With this is more kind of deduction, not really deduction, but this is more kind of, I guess it is kind of deduction because
Yeah.
you're trying to piece together clues that if you're the guesser, and if you're the librarian, you're trying to find ways to trip up the other players and lie about little things or lie about big things and, misguide them to the wrong places. So this is a different kind of game. So what do you think about fiction here?
I thought it was great. I like that you kind of you don't have to rack your brain trying to come up with a 5-letter word. There's words there for you. You can kind of pick ones that you think may be more difficult for that person, but the words are there. So I think that's good. I did have a little bit of difficulty remembering which one I was lying about, and you make marks, so there really was no reason for it. But I had, I lied about this here, but then he caught on to it, so you can't have to kind of make sure that you change up your lie a little bit. But I thought it was really fun, and it's a really unique word game.
What I think is so interesting about that aspect, like Sam just talked about, is that's true in real life. You're right, because like lies tend to snowball.
Yeah.
And you have to lie about one thing to lie about the next thing to lie about.
And very much like that.
And if you forget along the way, then people are going to be like, "You're lying to me.
Yeah.
Like your story's not adding up." And the same thing happens in this game.
Yeah. Lance was like, "What? But you already told." I was like, just forget about that."
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a cool aspect of this game. When you're the librarian, it's a different kind of game of trying to think what that other person is going to assume about the other things. And so you're doing a little bit of mind play with the librarian role. And as a guesser, not only are you trying to figure out the mind game that the librarian's doing, but you're also trying to figure out the word, right? And so there's still that Wordle kind of gameplay element to it.
And you got to figure out when to use your guesses.
Yes.
Or when to use your questions.
Yeah, the fact or fiction questions.
Because you only have so many, and I think we both kind of did it differently. And I was better at this game, but I also think I very specifically, what was the word that I picked the second time?
Oh gosh, I have no idea.
It ended with an S.
Plural words, right?
Yes.
Like a 4-letter word that ends
with an S.
with
And it was one that I was like, that is not a word that it was a very, normal word.
Yeah.
It wasn't like foreign or anything like that, but it was one that I was like, I think he's going to have a really hard time with this because it's not one that we use regularly.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to think about that when you're picking a word too.
Yeah.
And you thought you were being sneaky you had magic, and I think you thought you were being sneaky because of, G and C and everything. But because those letters were in there and they're so
you
cute,
were able to figure
I figured out
what the
really
word
quickly.
was really
I think at the third round, so.
Okay, let's get to pros and cons here for fiction. So, Sam, what stands out to you in a positive way as a non-gamer with this game?
I mean, I think it's just a unique layout for a game. It's not a board. You're kind of adding with the little rows. It's not something that I've seen, that type of format. So I think that was really unique. And then the coins and everything. So I like it. I really like the small box too.
Yeah. This is All Play makes these little games along with their bigger games, but these little box games can pack a big punch in a small box. Now, I won't say that all of them are home runs, but this one is definitely on the higher end of their little box games. And I agree 100% with Sam on that. This is a different kind of game. I don't know that I again, going back to what I said at the top of the video, I don't know that I can think of another game that's a word game where it's one against all, or if it's a deduction kind of, bluffing, not bluffing, but, misleading kind of game. This one's quite unique. So Is there anything about it that doesn't work so great for you as a non-gamer?
We never got to the point where we needed to use the second half of the board.
Okay.
So I kind of wonder how, I feel like if you did, it would feel like it's getting a little bit long.
Maybe a longer experience. The box
Yeah.
does say 20 minutes, and I think that that's a little misleading because the rules state that you're supposed to play 2 10-minute rounds.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be that kind of setting up for each of the 2 rounds. So it's going to be longer if you go the full 10 minutes for each round. Now, I do want to say something on that. I think this game is really difficult to win as the librarian, just because you have to be very clever with your lies
Yeah.
to just constantly keep the other players tripping up and not figuring out certain things, and you're at the mercy of what their guess is going to be next.
Yeah.
Right? So like what I mean by that is I can lie about something on their first guess, but whatever their second guess is going to cause me to either have to continue that lie from
Or
the first guess
change.
or change it. And if I'm changing it, then I got to be careful to not make a mistake that would
Yeah.
clearly give away what I lied about in the first round.
That's what I was really
And
bad
then
about.
in the third round, it's the same thing, except I got to make sure I'm not making a mistake from the first and second round,
Yeah.
and so on and so on and so forth. So I feel like it's a really difficult game to win as the librarian, and I don't know that you'll have a game that will go all the way through 10
Yeah.
guesses, right? Like that's the way the librarian wins, is either the other team runs out of guesses or they run out of time. And I think that's just a really difficult thing to accomplish.
Yeah.
So if you're somebody who is playing in a group of people that has somebody who's a very good word game player, or just a very skilled player in general, have them be the librarian
Yeah.
first and everybody else go up against
Yeah.
them. That's kind of my thoughts on that. Do you have any other cons that maybe stick out to you?
No, not really. I mean, it's a very specific game. Like, there's not
Yeah.
a different way to play it or anything like that. So if you don't like word games, it's not
Well,
going to
yeah.
be your cup of tea. But
Sure.
no, I think it's a good little game.
Yeah. The only other thing I think I might say with this one is going back to what Sam said about the note taking on that board.
Yeah.
Once you understand it, it's not going to be something that I think is going to trip up a whole lot of people. But your first playthrough, maybe the first time
Yeah.
anybody plays as the librarian, it could be an easy thing to make a mistake. And if you catch somebody in that mistake where they lied about the lie, let's say,
Yeah.
right? Like, and then not necessarily that they lied, but they just forgot that was what the lie was, and maybe they made 2 lies in the same round. That can kind of break down the game a little
Yeah.
bit, you know? So that can happen with this one. I won't say that's a huge problem, but I think it's something that you do need to be aware of.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get to scores for fiction here. Scale of 1 to 10, love to hate. Where does this unique, interesting word game come in at?
I'd probably give it a solid 7.
Solid 7?
Yeah.
What's your reasoning for that?
I mean, I think it's a good word game, but it is kind of a one-trick pony. Like, that's
Okay.
I don't know how consecutively you would play it. But out of all the word type games that we have, I think it is one of the more unique ones.
Okay. Yep, for sure. I'm a little higher, maybe. I think I'm maybe about a 7.2 for me on this one. I do really enjoy this game. I enjoy it for its uniqueness because, again, I think that's the best thing about it. I don't know of another game that's anything like this.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting to me. I do love that they've thrown in the literary theme to it with the different books. Not that really plays a huge role in the
No.
game, but it's a word game with a librarian theme to it, and I
Yeah.
like that. I think going back to what I said as my con with it, I don't know how many times it will get to the table if it sort of feels like the librarian just is going to have a really, really
Yeah.
hard time to win. Like that's going to put a damper on it. And
I think when we played, I don't think I saw it as me winning or losing as a librarian, but when I wasn't, could I beat you in less turns?
Well, and that's something that the rule book does suggest, that if you want to make a game more difficult, give the guessing team fewer guesses, only
Yeah.
8 guesses instead of 10, or give them 8-minute rounds instead of 10-minute rounds. And I would highly, say that that's something you should look into doing if you're experiencing what I'm talking about in the first few games that you play with this one. And that could definitely spice it up a little bit more
Yeah.
for sure. And then maybe even if you want to cut it down from 8 to say 7 or 6, that's something else you could consider. But that for me is maybe the thing that probably keeps it from being higher than 7.2 for me. So that's our thoughts here on Fiction. The game is from All Play. Leave us some comments down below. Let us know what you think about this game.
Make sure to like and subscribe and push that bell button so you get notifications of all our new content.
I'm Lance.
I'm Sam.
And we are Love to Hate, where we bridge the gap between gamers and non-gamers. We'll catch you next time.